I'm Joseph.
And I'm Nick.
This is Fish Jelly.
Yes, sir, it is.
How are you?
I'm alive. How are you?
Okay. So you're finished with jury duty.
Oh, yes.
Would you like to talk about it?
Back to life. Back to reality. Sure.
You were on the jury for a civil trial.
It was civil, not criminal.
Do you want to tell us what the case was?
It was about a family that was suing the city of Los Angeles regarding a gate that fell on a 5-year-old's head in 2020. So now he's 10. And the city but by the time that they even selected the jury, the city had already admitted liability. And so this trial was there to determine causation and damages.
So the family was asking for money because they believe that the child suffered brain damage, like irreparable brain damage that would render them incapable of taking care of themselves, basically, right?
Yes, everyone was in agreement that including the city, that a TBI, traumatic brain injury, had taken place. The kid's skull was fractured, and air had gotten into the skull. But yes, was there permanent brain damage based on this child's behavior? Because, as a 5-year-old, was in kindergarten, and is currently in the 5th grade, but we had to, in a very kind of painstaking manner, go through all the behavior issues this child was having, and then listen to examining experts on both sides based on the interpretation of this behavior and data to say, yeah, we believe this kid has a permanent brain damage.
So you didn't feel the plaintiff did a good job demonstrating that they had done everything they could.
I feel especially during the plaintiff's testimony that of all the people, it felt like these people were trying to get a big bag, and there were holes on both sides that I feel were not filled in, and maybe for reasons that are not because the legal team was no good. I just think it's, if you've ever been in the courtroom, a very complicated process about what can be admitted and why not, and building foundation and hearsay. A lot of stuff was struck down, or we weren't able to hear because of hearsay, so it's complex. But it felt like the picture that was painted was that a child was being held hostage by the system, and I think I softened a little bit towards the mother, who I felt was not a very good parent, or a very kind of irresponsible. Because we don't, going back to the video of the gate, this big ass rusty gate in an alley, this little kid was clambering all over it. It's like, and no parent in sight. Granted, when the grate crashes, we see an adult that's not the mother run to the kid to help try to lift it off. But it's like, I felt like it could have been a lot messier. But again, since the city had already admitted liability, there was, I think, this bit of playing with kid gloves about kind of how, dare I say, shitty the parents are, and an absent father, and how the kid was raised by the grandma who died of cancer during all of this. Everything, it was just very complicated and intense. But the courtroom was definitely a scene to behold, because people get bitchy, and it is a lot of fun, that part of it.
To rewind, saying that the kid was trapped by the system, the point is that, especially when people enter into a personal injury claim, that process, it's a racket, because I have experience with this, that the personal injury attorney, they want these cases because there's a potential payday. Mm-hmm. They're also in cahoots with these supposed medical providers, these chiropractors, physical therapists, these imaging centers, where they all perform these, what I would say are not legitimate services, and hold on to the bill, thinking that when there is a payday, they can all get, collect. Mm-hmm. But the problem with that and why you said the kid is trapped is because during that period, the the plaintiff, the injured party, they're not receiving real treatment.
No.
So the plaintiff's lawyer or lawyers team were not actually having this kid seek actual therapy because they're afraid that the findings would be that this kid does not have brain damage, right? So they just do stuff that shows that, oh, see, he does have a problem.
Yes, and depending very, because he's acting out at school. The pattern, and if you're looking at what I did learn from the various experts that testified, is there's not one thing clearly that indicates brain damage, but you're looking at patterns, and there is a pattern of behavior that that all sides agree on, is this kid has some kind of mood dysregulation disorder in a broader sense. But a lot of those I think are dependent on the environment, the home life that we were they tried to steer us very clear and wide of. And the defense kept trying to get that in as much as possible, as well as a history of ADHD from the father's side that was all we were strong armed into hearing as little as possible about. But what was happening was, I think the mother had brought the child into this one facility where a record was created, and then it would appear that's because nobody ever clarified for this. It would appear that shortly after that help was happening, and this kid was seeing a licensed social worker for therapy, etc. Shortly after that, it seems like the legal team was brought in, and she just stopped taking this kid to this place where he was getting help that was paid for. And those records yielded information that suggests the anger management issues the kid had due date that are prior to the gate falling on his head, because that was something the plaintiff was trying to stress vehemently, is that he changed drastically. And if he changed like so drastically that it becomes suspicious about why it took 3 years for anybody to really deal with anything about the kid. It's conflicting. And then during deliberations, I felt it just, there's a lot of conflicting things. And it's strange as an objective observer watching how people choose to handle things and speak to things, and how closing arguments were handled that are like, I don't, it's just a very curious, strange thing. But I mean,
ultimately the family received a tenth of what they were asking for, which was still,
it's a lot of money,
a considerable amount.
Well, so the city was suggesting that all told, about $500,000, I think they thought would suffice, because the treating the examining experts for the kid, what came up with a future life care plan of things that he would need, even though he's gone years without having any damn thing on there. They were, in my mind, very inflated, because one of them put in on this life care plan that this kid at the age of 18 is going to have to go, like, he's so debilitated, he's going to have to go to this assisted living care facility and private school and all of these things that are millions of dollars. And on cross, those experts for the plaintiff reneged on some of those things, saying like, like, I can't with a reasonable medical certainty say that like, as I'm being questioned about it so pointedly, I can say that he's for surely going to need that kind of care.
What's interesting is that they can ask for that money for that care, but they don't have to show that they use the money for that.
That's right.
So, because I was kind of baffled that it's like, I mean, can't we say that, yeah, we'll award you this money, but you have to use it for this treatment? No, there's just...
Well, even during deliberations, we were going through these various presented life care plans, and like, as a jury, you're told over and over again, like, don't bring in any expert knowledge you might have. It's all common sense. But what's Oscar Wilde saying about common sense? Something about how it's not too common. So it was curious listening to all of these strangers to me determine whether we thought he actually needed some of those things on the life that remained on the life care plan. Meanwhile, with every now and then someone piping up like, but these parents haven't shown that they care to do anything for this kid. And again, which is kind of probably unfair because of how this process has made them also look by withholding certain treatments from the child. And but you don't know that. And that's the thing. You give this money, and it's on them if they decide to use it for something that's not helping their child that might need the help. I don't know.
So as someone who always complains about jury duty, now that you've actually done it for the first time, how do you feel about
I
jury
don't
duty?
complain about jury
Every
duty.
time you get that summons.
Oh, it's dreadful because I don't. It's such an interruption of life, and
that's what I'm saying. So now that you've actually done it, have your feelings changed?
I have never tried to get out of it or been bullshitty about it, but yes, it's something that, especially, it's like the day I got back from London, I got to go run down here and do that, and there's the LA is on fire. It's just.
Well, but it would seem there's never a good time to receive the
exactly.
So that's what I'm trying to say. Like, now that you've done it, have your thoughts changed about the idea of serving on a jury?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, but
all this defense to get to the positive, which is that you ultimately did enjoy it.
Well, that's the thing, that there are juxtaposing, intersecting issues all the time, and they all have to be looked at. Nothing is ever just one thing. It's a complete package that we have to take a step back from, including one's emotional state during the process. But yes, but it is, that was 2 weeks of life. It was time consuming. And never get the plaintiffs were asking for 20 mil that the city would have to pay. And there was no question that the kid wasn't getting some money, because the gate did fall on this kid and caused significant damage. It's just how much was he going to or deserve for past non-economic. It was in the future economic area that the plaintiff was it was at that point, because we were so confused as we determined during deliberations, because we couldn't talk about it as it was ongoing, like why we were there. Like, it went from 6 million to 2 on the life care plan, and then it was at that final moment in closing argument when we're like, oh, they're asking for this much money. But we'd skirted around, we'd pussyfooted around that for so long, and then it's like, oh, you want $20 million, okay. And that is why the city dug their heels in.
My impression of personal injury stuff is, like, unless you have a legitimate injury, I think going through this process is such a waste of time. And some people make it their career.
Oh,
I mean, I had family members who would do that, like trying to slip in a grocery store, or get into a car accident that they try to make it like the other person's fault, and that's like their entire gig.
No,
to spend all that, just always having some sort of lawsuit going on to just ultimately collect, 10,000, 11,000.
Well, the thing is,
to me, that just feels like
all of that becomes
such a waste of time.
Public record, and the more that happens, the more your patterns become clear.
Well, sure, but I mean, there are people who really do think that they're going to hit, they play it like the lottery, but it is a big interruption. So it's, this side of this legal system is so interesting.
But
because it does seem predatory.
It does, and again,
and also there was a child who was injured, and it's like, did this child receive the best care subsequent to the injury? No, because, well, for factors related to the family and maybe their capabilities, but then at a point, because they engaged lawyers who then were like, oh, we got to build a case. So then building the case is more important than this child's care, their education.
Yes. But then what was driving me crazy for the plaintiff, it's like I feel like they could have done a better job of advising the mother, although they probably couldn't say they advised her, but somebody should have it. Like these are things that you should do that would reflect better upon you and would kind of declaw how they're going to paint your portrait on the defense, because y'all come across real dumb.
Anyway, moving on. wasn't going to talk about this, but then we keep getting all these comments, especially after the Oscar nominations. But everyone has a problem with Emilia Perez now.
Actually, I was reading this is in the social media sphere, yes, but outside in the world in reality, no.
Well, I mean, since I guess we're part of the social media sphere, it's like I've deleted all of them, but like just nonstop comments about how could you. First of all,
that
I'm not
shit.
going to explain why I like Emilia Perez because I already did in a 31-minute video. So like you commented under that video, so I guess you just didn't watch it. But I don't want to go on and on about it, except that I'm so confused with some of the critiques that people have, because it just feels like you could make these arguments for literally, how many movies are behind me as I'm talking? 800?
Mm-hmm.
You could pick any of these 800 movies, just randomly grab one, and I could find numerous things that would apply based on the arguments people have. I mean, it's just like the LGBTQ community doesn't like the presentation of trans people because her character is made out to be a liar, and that's what people are going
to. And that is exactly why we can't have shit.
But then, there are a lot of trans people who are happy with the movie, including the bitch in the movie. So it's like, I don't know.
Who's the first?
Why is some white cis woman on my page complaining about trans people when it's like, I mean, first of all, there are trans people who don't have a problem with it. Then the Mexican issue, like so many comments, which, not that it matters, but I'm also Mexican. So all these comments of like, as a Mexican, I'm offended. Okay, well, as a Mexican, I thought the movie was great. But it's like the presentation of Mexicans. Okay, well, you, again, pick any movie and whatever the villain represents, you could have the same argument. It's just a story.
So what y'all think about Sicario? Like it...
Any movie. To me, it's the intention. I don't know Jacques Audiard that well, except that he's a cis French man. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what people are saying. Like, so he can only tell stories about cis Frenchmen, or
if he only did, wouldn't there be accusations of how you?
Then the French would be mad.
Well, but it's just
like, I just
again, this is gatekeeping that is borderline bullying. I think. You can think what you want, you can like what you want, you can dislike what you want, and it's supposed to be about conversation, not about shutting people down. I noticed a couple comments about, like, we gave the new Mel Gibson directed film like a decent pass, and it's like, just because,
how can you support Mel Gibson? I don't know. How do you support your uncle who's racist?
I'm engaging with the creative output. I'm not here to judge the artist. I think Roman Polanski is one of the best filmmakers that has ever lived. Do I agree with shit that he's done in his life? No.
Y'all still driving Teslas and spending all your little extra money on Amazon. I don't know. I mean, it's your choice. You do what you're comfortable with.
Well, it's art. You aren't supposed to conflate the art with the artist. And again, I have said many times, talked about reception theory. We all bring a certain baggage in with us, and I try my best not to have that baggage.
People can do what they want to do. I don't give a shit. If you don't want to watch Flight Risk because you hate Mel Gibson and Mark Wahlberg, then work. If you don't like Emilia Perez because you don't like the depiction, then you don't have to like it. But I just think that people are, and I don't want to talk about politics. That's why we don't on this podcast. But I will say, I think that we're in the current political situation we're in because there is a portion of the nation that can unify and ignore all the little bullshit.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then there's another part that it would seem I'm a part of where there's all this infighting. The fact that someone would basically accuse me of being like racist or bigoted towards Mexicans, or that I'm transphobic because I like this movie, to me is absurd.
Because you know what that does? It shuts down a lot of other people. It's bullying.
Don't we want to see depictions of queer, trans people? Don't we want to see depictions of people of color?
I want to see flawed depictions. I want to see depictions that don't work. Like with Steve McQueen talking about black films. We need to have bad black movies. It's okay.
And also, spoiler, like Amelia Perez dies at the end of the movie. So all, like everyone mad that they're glorifying this character is like, I mean, she does die at the end. So I don't know that she's like this. I mean, they do make her like the patron saint or whatever because there's a parade. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I just thought it was a really unique, beautiful story that felt fantastical.
Mm-hmm.
This is not realistic the way they depicted the cartel in Mexico. I didn't think
Pick any film.
right.
The
I didn't think
suspension of
Emilia
disbelief.
Perez was a documentary. I did not think that Emilia Perez was based on reality. I thought it was a fantasy. It literally feels like a fantasy. It feels like a fantasy musical. I mean, we just reviewed Jesus Christ Superstar on Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wasn't trying to because I did, there were all these like articles and videos about dissecting it and people's problems with Jesus Christ Superstar. An Andrew Lloyd Webber musical.
Right.
That's not even supposed to be Jesus. Like, it's about a touring company that go to like, what is the problem? Y'all just want to be mad. And like you said, all you're doing is making people not want to tell these stories.
And you are making people, you are also making people that, like, I'm not even going to deal with trans shit. And we're going to lose out on, we already have, arguably exponentially, because you've made people afraid to even engage. And that is exactly what we don't want.
I saw that Jacques Audiard had an engagement in Mexico to talk about the film that he canceled, and he issued an apology saying that it wasn't his intention and that maybe he wasn't the best person to try. And I think that's unfair because I think everyone should be allowed to tell the story in their head. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Exactly.
But there are so many examples of it working. I just think that this feels like gatekeeping. It's weird because so y'all think Jacques Audiard is the enemy? Absolutely. There are literal politicians trying to erase trans people's existence.
Uh-huh.
And you don't do shit about that, but then you want to be all up on social media. I've blocked so many people on Instagram because I'm so tired of them posting all these really specific grievances about situations that they don't even have ownership of. And they make it their entire personality.
Well, we need to stop policing minds. And you have to understand that behavior, at a certain point, the thing that you're railing against, you're becoming. That is fascist behavior. And you are becoming the thing that you are railing against. We need to listen to each other.
And be forgiving and like try to see it from a different perspective. And then it's okay not to like things. Like, I feel like you don't have to have a reason why you don't like something, but people always want to have some like asterisk about, well, this is problematic. And you just don't like the shit. It's okay. I don't like a lot of shit for no good goddamn reason. And that's totally fine.
And even, not to defend Mel Gibson, but how punitive do you want to be? Like, does he never get to work or direct or act again?
I'm sorry, but I say this all the time because I know a lot of people, I witness a lot of shit, and y'all be mad about celebrities and politicians who behave just like your family members, who you let your kids go spend the weekend with.
Or who you devote your family time to at the holidays.
Mel Gibson hasn't said shit that your daddy hasn't said.
Right? Most likely.
Right?
Right.
And it's like, I'm not like but I hate him because it's just like, I'm not defending Mel Gibson, but also like I'm not who he has to answer to.
Exactly.
I'm just someone talking about movies I watch, and I thought that movie was fun. And like you said, does that so a person does something you don't like, and for the rest of their life they have to pay penance to you? Mm-hmm. That seems crazy.
Well, and if you eat a parallel avenue about this, if you're following, critics, and bunny ears, film criticism, it should be, you shouldn't have to agree with what every person that you partake of their opinion, but you should be thinking that they are giving an honest opinion and not just echoing what every goddamn other person is saying. When you and I, are not in agreement with each other or with kind of the majority of other film critics out there today, that should reflect that this is I don't care what anybody else says. This is why I like it, and we outline why. And it's okay not to agree with us either. But what the point of it should be about a grand sense of community and culture and culture and conversation. That is the fucking point.
Well, we can't use the F word.
Oh.
So just to be clear, I do think there are times when we should hold people accountable for their ideas, their actions, like politicians, like civic leaders, like your pastor. Mm-hmm. It's like, hold that same magnifying glass to people who actually have that responsibility. An artist, I don't think, like I think people can create what they want to create. and we can receive it how we receive it. But don't try to convince me of I'm not out here trying to tell everyone like you need to watch this movie, it's good for you and you need to accept what it says. I'm just saying that I really enjoyed it.
Don't put your parameters on me.
I'm not raising children off of these movies. You know what I mean? Like that's not.
And if I wanted
don't
to,
know.
isn't that my right? Because we don't.
Well, but I'm just saying that I'm not saying it's absolute. I'm saying that there are times when we should hold people accountable. But like it seems like in this world we live in, especially among a certain group of people, maybe like people who consider themselves progressive and liberal, it's like the shit y'all choose to get worked up about. Sometimes like, God, I want to be done with this conversation, but it's just like even criticizing comedians about the things that they say, it's just jokes. It's just humor.
Yes.
It's just like, ugh.
Well, we are not.
I posted a Mark Norman thing that I immediately deleted because I got like 2 comments, and then like him talking to who's the guy from Mad TV, the Asian guy whose name I always forget. They do a podcast together sometimes, and they're basically saying like, oh, if you were gay, I would think you're cute, and then like, oh, well, you're cute too, and like, I don't know. It's just like everyone seems so sensitive about things that are like, it's just meant to be funny. It's just meant to be funny. There are bigger fish to fry.
Like when Paul Rudd did the Spin Me Round. Like everybody got so upset. Like, why?
Anyway.
We are not crabs in a bucket. We need to scuttle the bucket, which I know I've said somewhere sometime before.
Moving on. Speaking of people complaining online, I saw this term reverse nepotism. Who is Margaret Qualley's mom?
Andie MacDowell.
So I guess Andie MacDowell, people were criticizing because she was saying like, oh, now that my daughter is popping.
Is hot right now.
Now people are, now there's like my resurgence. So people are complaining about reverse nepotism. I don't even understand that. That lady was already famous.
She was very famous.
So the fact that like her daughter is now notable and now wow. Again, things to be mad about. Like, okay. Okay. Now moving on to something positive.
Okay.
5 on the black hand side.
Oh, we're running right into that. Okay.
Nick's going to highlight 5 filmmakers who deserve more shine than Tyler Perry. So here we go.
And some of them have a lot of shine. I've cast the net wide.
Number 1.
I got Steve McQueen. Y'all should know who Steve McQueen is. And I'm not talking about the white actor. I'm talking about the celebrated black director.
I know, because if you Google Steve McQueen, because I was pulling images for my little collage, of course it pulls up the actor.
Yeah, I mean, they have the same name. But
they have the same name.
And maybe that's kind of a stroke of brilliance as well. But I'd say I like Steve McQueen, the director. I was never a huge fan of the actor Steve McQueen. Bullet is exceptional. There's a few anyway. Steve McQueen, the director, of course, Hunger and Shame and 12 Years a Slave, his first 3 films with his muse, Michael Fassbender, which for years made me think that he might be gay, but he's not.
Because Michael Fassbender used to be a snack. Well, he still is.
He's still a handsome man.
Yeah, I think he is still. What's the one we reviewed for Patreon?
The Killer.
The Killer.
David Fincher film.
I did enjoy that movie.
Yeah, more so than not. It's not my favorite Fincher film. Anyway, so you've never seen 12 Years a Slave.
No, that's one of those ones that I just don't.
Someone
might have to pay me to see
I remember the moment I saw it and seeing Lupita for the first time, being like, "Who's this woman?" And of course, she won her Oscar. You did watch Hunger with me. I remember renting that when I lived in Minnesota. You haven't seen Shame, which might be, Shame might be interesting to revisit because Fassbender has sexual addiction in that. And I've seen his 4-hour documentary, Occupied City, which is worth watching. I would suggest on a Sunday afternoon, somewhere you could pause it. And we reviewed Blitz, of course, which, I've heard quite a few people talking shit about Blitz, including critics and non-critics. And I had also written a piece about this, and I was told that it was nice that somebody actually wrote something positive. I thought, to me, Blitz felt like the kind of hopeful war films that were coming out during and just prior to the war ending in the UK in the 1940s. But and I thought Saoirse was cute, and I liked the kid. But yeah, people that strangely had a very muted reception for a Steve McQueen film.
Next.
F. Gary Gray, you know that name?
Yes, Set It Off.
Set It Off. Well, that is the pinnacle. That is my favorite of his. But Friday, of course, came before that and is, really a cultural juggernaut. Straight Outta Compton. It is.
No, I was gonna, in our review of One of Them Days, there were a couple of comments about people saying that they feel like they would get their black card taken away for not thinking that Friday is like the funniest movie ever.
I don't think it is, but it's it's certainly a time capsule and generated a whole lot of careers.
I think Friday is for my age range, and then also being from South Central Los Angeles, I think Friday is like a part of the culture.
It is, and moving the culture forward. Really.
Do I think that it is the funniest movie? No, there are moments, and I can quote a lot of moments. So I do think it's worth its weight. But
yes, for sure. The two sequels, maybe.
But not, if I'm telling the truth, I laughed more during One of Them Days than I've ever laughed watching Friday.
Yeah, and that's okay.
But
too.
They're both great movies.
Yes,
so.
and part of going back and watching films, that were notable, or that say like pick any number of Criterion films, and you're like, this was notable at a point, and it's understanding the context too of when it came out. Because I watch a lot of shit. I'm like, I have no warmth towards this film, but for what it was worth at the time is important. And I also I haven't watched it in years, but I remember liking his F. Gary Gray's remake of The Italian Job. Because, I was never a big fan of the original Michael Caine Italian Job. But he's done, of course, some things that I haven't loved as much. He did a Fast and the Furious film, and I absolutely hated Be Cool, which was a follow-up to Get Shorty. But I also wasn't a huge fan of Get Shorty. Anyway, but
we're highlighting these directors.
Well, I'm just saying, okay, that's true. But I just gave you 4 films I actually really liked.
I was pleasantly surprised with Straight Outta Compton.
I was as well. And that was 2015. So that was the last thing I really liked from F. Gary Gray. But Set It Off is masterful.
Next.
Gina Prince-Bythhewood, who you're also familiar with.
We reviewed Love and Basketball as a live or as a podcast?
I think it was a podcast. Yeah.
I remember enjoying that film.
Yeah, Love and that was her debut. You also, one of our first date movies was Secret Life of Bees.
Oh, with J. Hud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I liked The Woman King.
And The Woman King, which we reviewed. Yes, I liked that as well. I also am a fan of Beyond the Lights with Gugu Mbatha-Raw and Nate Parker. I think that is a very lovely film that is kind of underrated. We reviewed a film that we panned by her as well, but I think Gina is a pretty impressive director.
Next.
Maddie Diop, who you are also familiar with because we did a Patreon review of Atlantics, which premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 2019. She's the first Black woman director to have a film compete at Cannes. It took home an award. Mm-hmm. And then she just won the Golden Bear at Berlin last year, about a year or so from now ago, for Dahomey, which is an excellent documentary, very short documentary, very artistic and creative documentary that I highly recommend if you haven't seen. But so Maddie Diop, whose father was a composer, whose uncle was a very famous director, did Tuki Buki, Hyenas, a couple other films I know of his. I first was introduced to her as an actor because she starred in Claire Denis' excellent film, 35 Shots of Rum. I also really liked Simon Killer from Antonio Campos. So yeah, I think she's multifaceted for sure.
And last but certainly not least,
Julie Dash, another name you should know.
We reviewed Daughters of the Dust, which I remember. Well, I thought it was a beautiful film, but also that's the first studio film.
No, first.
The first film with a theatrical release
from a black woman.
By a black woman.
Mm-hmm. Daughters of the Dust, yeah.
Which was 1991.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. There were people.
But I would highly recommend that film.
There are films before that, such as Losing Ground, that the director of whom died of cancer before which I think probably also silenced the film, but which is also really worth a watch, but never got a theatrical release. But yeah, Julie Dash is the first. But even then, like, she didn't have this flourishing career. She's worked in television. She did the music video for Tracy Chapman's classic "Give Me One Reason." But she's still been around doing stuff here and there. I think another notable item in her filmography would be, it's a television film, but the Rosa Parks story with Angela Bassett, which should be something everybody would watch at some point in their lives. But yeah, Julie Dash, very important. And, I think she's a reference point to something that comes up in today's secret film that was selected.
Moving on to the restaurant section, we watched a film called The Swimmer that we reviewed for the Patreon. And the star of that film is
Burt Lancaster.
Burt Lancaster. I was going to say Charlton Heston, but
oh no, much different.
Anyway,
Bert's way more fun.
I really enjoyed The Swimmer. I would recommend it. But anyway, at one point in the film, he makes a cocktail for a character,
Janice Rule,
and he's like, "Let me make you a bull shot." And when he hands it to her, it was just this brown drink. So I'm like, let me look up a bull shot. And then I was so fascinated, I went and bought ingredients. Well, I only needed one ingredient to make it because we had everything else. But a bull shot is basically a Bloody Mary. But instead of tomato juice, it's beef broth. And I mean, did it sound interesting to you when I said it?
Yeah. Well, I also did a broth cleanse recently. So yeah, of course.
So I'm like, well, let me go get, because all we needed was the beef broth.
No, we had that.
Oh no, we had beef broth, but this one wanted, I looked far and wide. It wanted like double strength beef broth in a can. And I couldn't find that. I went to 2 places. So I just bought beef broth in a can.
But well, you could get bone broth,
So it was, so it's beef broth, Worcestershire sauce, vodka. There are a couple recipes.
Celery salt.
But celery salt. You could put a little Tabasco in there, some lemon juice. But what were your thoughts of the drink?
Kind of dull.
Yeah, it felt like for people who don't like too much seasoning. So instead of like a Bloody Mary that might be a little too picante, you might get a bull shot.
If you think ketchup is spicy, you might like a bull shot.
Yeah, but I did think that's kind of the perfect drink for the people who say, like, I like to drink my lunch.
Yeah.
Because, you can get the bone broth that has a lot of protein in it.
You can get your protein and get loopy.
Yeah. So I would like to maybe try it next time with bone broth and then definitely season it more.
Yeah.
Because that celery salt was not enough.
I like a little more flavor.
And I probably should have I made it to recipe, but I think it needed a little more. It needed a little more flavor.
Well, in the context of the film, with this lady lounging outside in her pool, it's like, you're drinking that? And what lives are these like?
Next, there's a restaurant by our house that went viral on social media. And so so that's how I discovered images of some stuff they sell, but it's called Ara's, or I'm assuming I'm pronouncing it correctly, Ara's Shawarma. And what caught my attention is they have these Dubai chocolate bars and then these Dubai style strawberry chocolate like parfaits. So I was really excited to try it. So one night I ordered the chocolate bar and the strawberry parfait, and then we went to go pick it up. Okay, first of all, these 2 items, the total was $40 because the parfait was $21 and the chocolate bar was $19. Can you talk about the chocolate bar?
It was very small.
The chocolate bar was smaller than my iPhone.
I bought you
when you came out and walked, because I had parked out. For people who follow me on Instagram, that night that the cat was in my car, we were waiting for Nick to bring us the food. When you walked in front of my car and I saw what you had in your hand, I was about to get out the car.
He almost drove off without me, y'all.
No, I was about to get out and say, we need to go back. They made a mistake. Because there's no way I paid $19 for a fun-sized chocolate bar.
I bought you chocolate from Switzerland when I was there last summer that was expensive, but the portions were bigger than that bar.
Okay, aside from the price, what did you think of the chocolate bar?
If you want to buy me some kind of chocolate fondue thing, I can make that shit.
So what it is, this Dubai style, is that they basically use Belgian chocolate, but then the inside of the chocolate bar is this, I forget,
pistachio crunchy thing.
Yeah, I think it has a name like Kanafi. Don't kill me if I got it wrong, but it's like this pistachio nutty fibrous thing
which tastes good.
It almost tastes like it has the texture of like when you bite into I don't know, it's almost like if you mix a Mounds bar with like a Kit Kat or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's kind of crunchy but fibrous. The chocolate is good.
Which that kind of mixture is you could have a break me off a piece of that nut or give me that nut as the slogan.
And then the strawberry parfait, it was like if you go get like a grande size frap at Starbucks, like that size cup, so not big.
Mm-hmm.
There were maybe like 6 whole strawberries in there.
Mm-hmm.
They were fresh, nice big strawberries, 6 of them cut in half.
Plump.
And then they put this like pistachio fudge with the Belgian chocolate melted over.
And some kind of yellow.
And then pistachio. And then I think it's that kanafe
cream-ish thing.
Maybe that's inside the chocolate bar. And then some sort of, I don't know if it looked like shredded coconut, but it didn't taste like coconut.
No, it wasn't coconut. It was something else.
Yeah. So I don't know what that was. Okay. That was $22. Mm-hmm. Aside from the price, what did you think?
Meh.
I thought it was very tasty. I think that's worth like $10
or less. I don't know.
Not $21. So I definitely think that chocolate bar is a ripoff. And I feel so stupid because on their Instagram page, you see them making bigger bars.
Mm-hmm. They did have some, yeah.
Those are only $22. So for $3 more, I could have gotten 6 times as much chocolate. So for anyone who ever goes there, just get the large size bar.
I will say the young gentleman at the front counter that made all of that for me in front of my eyes was very friendly. So that was nice.
But the other food there looks spectacular.
Oh, I want the savory shit. That shawarma, they had a lot of other stuff that looked good to me.
Yeah. So I will definitely be going back. Ara's shawarma, if y'all want to give me some free chocolate to make up for that $40 nonsense I paid for. But
somebody's gonna send you a bag of Almond Joy.
Well, hey, the P.O. box is in the description of this episode. So feel free to send me some. What do you prefer, Mounds or Almond Joy?
I don't know. Sometimes I feel like a nut. What can I say? I like them both. They're fine. I don't really eat candy or candy bars, though.
I don't need the almonds, so I can just take Mounds.
My kryptonite are gummy bears. So
you can send gummies to the P.O. box. They need to be sealed, though.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Who's sending unsealed shit?
Well, sometimes people ask if they can send stuff that's like, I wouldn't, like, don't bother because I'm not going to eat, like, it needs, or it needs to be sent like an edible arrangement, something that's like they sent, the store made it and brought it to me directly. But yeah, like someone's like homemade gingerbread. No, I'm not.
Oh, gingerbread does sound good. Oh, molasses cookies.
You got scammed at the Grand Central Market.
It's my own fault.
We've talked about this before.
We have, but I can't. I like seafood.
I think I actually read a list of like the foods that are like the biggest financial ripoff at restaurants.
I know, but I like lobster, and it was speaking to me, and it was a weak moment, and I thought, every time I've been to Grand Central Market, it's really with you, and I would never get this with you.
You always blame me.
Well,
you always say that you can't have what you want when I'm around, which I guess is true in some sense. But whenever it's food,
please, you give me when I get seafood shit, you give me flack sometimes.
No, I don't. How many times do I say, "Oh, you should get the shrimp or the whatever"? Like,
yeah, sometimes you are, and then sometimes you aren't.
You make it seem like you can't order what you want to eat.
Well, it's okay. Anyway, so
go on and tell you a little lie. You ordered a what?
See, look what you do.
Like
that
I stop you from doing all these things.
I can just
Okay.
imagine you as a lawyer. That would be a big objection, and it would be overruled. Go on, tell your little lie.
And the jury
I
would,
object.
and you know what? I'd be the Johnny Cochran in that bitch. The jury would buy into it. They really would. Okay, you.
Yes, I agree. It wouldn't be hard to villainize me, but whatever. Anyway, um, so I saw these advertisements for Broad Street Oyster Company because I tried something new every day, and then I was like, I saw this and I bypassed it like 4 or 5 days, and I'm like, you know what? I'm never gonna try this unless it's a situation like this where I'm all alone and stuck. So let me try the little lobster roll. Their world famous lobster roll. And they had 3 sizes, one of which was extra large. I'm like, I don't need all that. So I'm like, can I get a regular size? No fries. I don't want all that. And the girl, you can get it hot or cold, hot with butter or cold with mayonnaise. And I do like mayonnaise. And the girl said she recommended that. That shit was it was like half the size of a hot dog bun that had been uh, nicely fried in butter and with some lobster just at the top, just at the slit of the bread. Not deep down in the bread, you know, when you get a sandwich or seafood sandwich, any kind of tuna sandwich, and it's like the pocket of bread is stuffed with all the goodness. No, like 4 pieces of some kind of part of the lobster at the very surface of it. That shit was not even an appetizer, and that was $25 plus tax. And anyway, I already knew. And I still walked right into it. I walked into the hellfire.
Dang.
We all have our Achilles heel, and I guess mine is lobster rolls. But Jesus Christ, you know where we had a really good lobster roll, and it was also expensive, but I felt sated. And I don't need to feel full when I leave a restaurant. I mean, I felt like this was a reasonable portion for what you're charging for what it is. Was that Connie and Ted's place in West Hollywood. Anyway.
Films released we didn't cover. Inheritance.
This is a new film by Neil Berger, and who is from that Bradley Cooper movie Limitless, and I think he did one of those Divergent Elite series films, if not more than one. This kind of was very quietly released. I received emails about it. Of course, we were insanely busy, and this is not something we got to, but Rhys Ifans is a star in it. Actually, I'm completely forgetting what the plot is about, but yeah, a new Neil Berger film came out this week.
Into the Deep.
I'm surprised that you didn't ask to cover this because it's a new shark horror, a new shark thriller.
I did. I sent you a post about it a while ago.
When I sent you what was coming out this week, and I said, "What do you want to cover beyond what we've already agreed on?" Crickets. Christian Sesma is the director. I guess what's notable about it is Richard Dreyfuss, who I think has lost his mind, is in the film. And maybe that's more evidence towards the reality of that.
Well, maybe I'm sure I'll catch it. Oh, I recognize someone in it. Okay. Well, anyway. Moving on. Lastly, Rose.
There are a lot of films called Rose, but if I had more time this week, I would have liked to watch it. But Orly Sada is the director, and I would have watched it for the lead titular character played by Françoise Fabian, who is, now an older woman, but, she's worked with Romer, a few of the other greats. But, that came out this week.
Okay, this past week on Patreon, we're continuing to review season 17 of RuPaul's Drag Race. We also did a review for Night Watch and The Passion of Joan of Arc. And what I think is a really funny review, The Book of Henry, which I was not prepared for, how ridiculous that movie is. So people can give us money to listen to those. Unfortunately, there is an entry in the obituary section. A French film director died, Bertrand Blier.
Yep, Bertrand Blier, who I think is an essential provocateur of French cinema. You've seen at least 2 of his films because we have record of it.
Going places?
We did. That was a podcast that I selected that for one of our podcasts, and you did not like it. But a
Oh.
very young Isabelle Huppert, Gerard Depardieu, Patrick Dewar, Jeanne
Oh.
Moreau shooting herself in the vagina with a gun. Yeah.
Did I watch my biopic, My Life is Hell?
No, you have not seen that. We also have a review for the Blu-ray release of Get Out Your Handkerchiefs, which you did like a lot more.
Get Out Your Handkerchiefs.
Yeah, this is like probably in 2020 when we filmed that.
Oh, wow.
But that is a lot of fun. He's worked with Isabel a couple times. Like I said, she has a small part in Going Places, but she's in his 1983 film My Best Friend's Girl, which, to be honest, is kind of silly. I think it's been a while since he did anything I really liked. I think mostly the 70s was kind of his heyday. Back when the Silent Theater was open, they had a retrospective, so I saw a few things there, including that's how I first saw Get Out Your Handkerchiefs and Buffet Foie, Cold Cuts. Another one that I really like was Femme Fatale. Actually, if you haven't seen it, the film that you would need to see by Bertrand Blier is called Ménage from 1986 with Gerard Depardieu, who you like to work with, and Michel Blanc. And it is Gerard is a bisexual criminal. Michel Blanc is this cross-dressing person that also has some interesting sexual hang-ups. Like the title suggests, it's a ménage. And I also think Too Beautiful for You is a lot of fun with Gerard Depardieu. He's married to Carol Bouquet, who, is a stunning looking woman, but kind of cold sexually. And he starts having an affair with Josiane Belasco, who is kind of a frumpy, who many consider to not be, the most beautiful person, but he falls in love with her because she's of their chemistry. But that's a fun movie too.
Well, goodbye to Mr. Blier. Okay. The secret film this week was your choice, and you chose the 1995 documentary Black Is, Black Ain't, directed by Marlon Gibb. I am so sorry. I wanted in my head. I was thinking Marla Gibbs, and then I'm like, don't mess it up, and I just did. Marlon Riggs,
yes,
who we're familiar with, and we have another podcast episode about his documentary Tongues Untied.
Yes,
which is about sexuality within the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
This film, I'm going to read the premise, is about Black experiences with a backdrop of Creole cooking. That's not the best IMDb premise, but basically he's outlining the Black experience and using specifically gumbo as a metaphor of how there's so many different components and then how the roux sort of binds it all together. But he covers so many different areas. It's pretty impressive. And then for it only being 87 minutes, it feels so much more grand.
Yeah.
Well, grand and
dense.
Mm-hmm. Than what the runtime would suggest. Why did you choose this documentary?
I've been wanting to watch it for a while. I have the signifying works of Marlon Riggs on Blu-ray from Criterion. For years and years and years, it was kind of difficult to see Marlon Riggs stuff. So, I'm glad. The purpose to me of the Criterion Collection is the preservation of, noteworthy cinema. So it's very lovely that this collection is part of it because you can go see. If actually, I don't know if it has absolutely everything he did, but from his before he died, his kind of very important, notable body of work. But yeah, so I've been wanting to watch this, and it always felt like something that should be an occasion that should be a discussion, because to me that was the point of Marlon Riggs and his work. It was to motivate, it was to unite, it was to cause discussion, it was to move the culture forward. So again, that's why I haven't watched everything in the collection, because I think that his stuff deserves for us to take our time with it and to mull over it and to see how far we've come and how far we've yet to go.
I'm just going to start going through my notes. So this is his Marlon Riggs' last film. He actually died during the making of this documentary, Black Is, Black Ain't. He died from complications due to AIDS.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout the documentary, we see him in, like, he's literally in the hospital bed, sick,
Yeah.
trying to finish this work. So that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, so he becomes an essential part of his own gumbo, you know?
Which I guess, well, so that ties in my next comments. But first, I want to say, I think that because I remember also from Tongues Untied, I think what made that documentary so powerful and this one equally so is that he's such an essential part of it,
Yes.
and is revealing so much that it's like hard to argue, right? Because you see other works and people want to argue the message and
Mm-hmm.
the validity, but it's like this man actually, put his foot in it. So it feels very real and very personal.
Well, it goes macro to micro.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But getting to the gumbo, I think it makes for a great metaphor. However, considering how we've already talked about how I feel about seafood, watching the preparation and just the point is I've never liked gumbo.
Really? See, clearly I come from a white northern Minnesota family. My mom would make gumbo.
Now
I don't know how it compares to some others, but I remember.
Now I've had gumbo. So some people will make gumbo with just with chicken and sausage,
mm-hmm.
and I'll do that.
Andouille, mm-hmm.
But like andouille, like that's about it. Because I know, like even in the documentary, they talk about people using alligator sausage. No, I'll do chicken and like pork sausage. That's about it.
That was my introduction to okra.
I also don't love okra. Like I don't like the texture.
Well, I love, when it's cooked, to me, it seems kind of slimy, but I like dried okra.
So, yeah, but I think that's such a good for this documentary and what they're talking about.
Well, they're talking about ingredients in the beginning, and there's the constant chanting that comes back of the chorus saying black is, black ain't, and all about, which to me is signifying that, black is everything, black is nothing. What are we putting into it?
But so what is he confronting? Religion, sexuality, colorism, education, like age, how like younger people interpret
intergenerational differences.
Yes, trauma, all that. So
well, and nomenclature, right?
Well, that's my next note. So Marlon starts by telling a story about his friend and how his friend had a hard time with the transition from being called colored to black.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have some really cool people in this documentary. One being Angela Davis.
Yep.
And she talks about how we have several people talking about this, but just the idea of like how black used to be like a very derogatory term.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course they go into sort of the definition of black prior to people being referred to as black, and the connotation of black being dirty, denoting death, it being atrocious, wicked, disgraceful. So giving that background, it's understandable how people really had a hard time with that moniker.
And Angela Davis, who, she's somebody you could listen to talk to all day. And she had a good statement about how as people, they're obsessed with this naming because they weren't allowed to. It was taken from them.
They were named by others for so long.
And the term colored, that was, as we're told, that's the white man's word.
Then there's another gentleman in there who tells a story, because then they're talking about being Creole, which basically it's a discussion about colorism.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells a story about how, because he's Creole, very fair skinned, he was telling the story of his father who did not want to be seen as black or called black. And that they used to have these parties where the dad would turn away dark-skinned black people, and actually had a blind man working the door.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that they would test to see how this blind man would test to see how black someone is whether or not he could run a comb through their hair.
Isn't that so creepy?
But then you have other people, it's just so funny, like trying to define something that is the kaleidoscope or the patchwork that makes up what is a black person is so varied that it's like you can't just go off of skin tone or hair texture.
No.
And then we see how people would define like people's hair texture, which looking back is just so crazy because there are people with very, very dark skin tones who have almost perfectly straight hair. There are people who are as pale as a ghost who have very coiled hair. But it, that discussion I thought was very, very interesting. Then we get to sexuality, not so much like gay straight, but sort of like misogyny. And we have Bell Hooks in the thing, who I really enjoy.
Also could listen to her talk all day. Yep.
But she talks about a lot of things, but she brings up Eddie Murphy's Raw.
Yeah, that was one of my first notes. Like, this is insane listening to Bell Hooks talk about Raw.
Yeah. And basically how she's saying that this need that black men have to conquer women sexually.
Well, how the culture has, at this point, trying to regain itself by being a worship of the phallus.
Because early depictions of black men were seen as eunuchs.
Yes.
Like asexual. And then black women were always seen as like these strong figures.
But also desexualized.
But then that translates
sometimes
as being like not feminine.
Mm-hmm.
So attempting to regain that, but then you have people like Angela Davis saying that there was this emphasis on sort of lifting up the black man and that black women supported black men, but then black men aren't supporting black women. I thought that conversation was very good. And then we have other intellectuals talking about that I thought was very, very interesting.
And Bell Hooks, I thought, had a very nice personal story about watching her, about an experience that happened with her mother.
Yeah, talking about how one day her and her siblings witnessed her parents get into a fight, and
the father accused the mom of having an affair.
And then the father kicked the mother out. And that's when she realized there wasn't parity. And then she saw her mother's brothers come to pick her up, or her uncles, and assuming that they were going to defend her, but really they listened to the dad and took her away. And so that was her first glimpse.
And saying that she took her a long time to forgive her siblings for just going up and going to bed. And I really like, there's not like a lot of special effects in this documentary, but they double down on the echoing of her final statement saying, "Witness this."
Yeah. Dr. Cornel West is in it, only for like, I think he only speaks at one moment, but that was cool. But my favorite speaker was this lesbian scholar and activist named Barbara Smith.
Who's sadly dead now as well. But yeah.
No, Barbara Smith?
Yeah.
Is she?
Yes.
Oh.
Bell Hooks is gone. Barbara Smith's gone. Yeah, Barbara Smith died in 2020.
She did?
Yeah, she's 70.
Really?
Yes.
I thought I looked her up because I was like, oh, I want to learn more about her. But either way, I definitely want to like watch stuff about her and read some of her stuff. But I found her really interesting.
Yeah, same.
But they talk about education and how being a black person with an education is sometimes a detriment to how they are defined as black people. I thought that was really interesting. We get a really sweet moment with Marlon in the bed, very sick. And he starts singing different styles of music. I thought that was really cool. Then we have, because it's the 90s, right? And so we have these young people talking about civil rights leaders like Malcolm X, Harriet
and young
Tubman.
is in like 12, 13, 14-ish.
Well, are you talking about the kids from Inglewood?
Yes.
No, I'm talking about the ones who look college aged.
Oh, yeah.
And they're talking about like MLK, Malcolm X, Harriet Tubman, and they're saying basically like, what good will they do for us now? And I thought that was a very interesting sort of the generational interpretation of the civil rights movement, of how they see themselves as black people, their position in the world. God, you know what I kept thinking as the documentary ended? It would be so brilliant if someone could find some of these people, the younger ones, and talk to them now.
Yeah.
Like they could call it like Black Was, Black Is, or so. Like I don't know, like a follow up to this documentary,
Black was, black wasn't.
something like that. And then find, because then the kids you were mentioning, we see these three young boys who look like they're like 12, 13, 14. They're in Inglewood. They say they're gangbangers. One of them feels hopeless while another one is really focused on
Motivated.
really motivated to do better. And that one who said, I want to get my education, I was trying to Google him to see. I couldn't find anything, but I would love to know
what happened. But even these kids able to vocalize how there was no one there to like show them a better way, and how what the younger kids need someone to do that for them was enlightening but depressing. That they're able to these kids are able to vocalize this.
Something that I really related, I related to a lot in this documentary, but something that I feel like I witnessed firsthand growing up in Los Angeles and, during this time period, is this comparison of like Black American culture and people who feel more aligned with that versus Blacks who are embracing their Afrocentricity. And then this discussion about your true identity and people feeling like they aren't aligned with like their African roots, and telling the story of how our ancestors, trying to sort of reframe our history from not just being slaves, but kings and queens. And I thought that was really interesting. There's also a noted choreographer in the film, Bill T. Jones, who we see dancing throughout, that I thought was a nice touch. Then we get to sexuality, and I think
well, Bill talks about, because there's about the embracing of femininity and masculinity in all of us. Each of us have that in ourselves, and he has a nice statement about that.
Well, and then another man talks about how his Blackness is diminished because I love a man, which I get that comment a lot on our YouTube videos. Like, because I'm gay, I'm not even Black. I'm like, okay.
Well, I think a recurring theme, and I believe Marlon says that this himself, is we have to look at how we hurt each other. And I think both within specific cultures and taking a step back further and further out, like that's something we all need to pay attention to in every regard.
Of course, they bring up Bayard Rustin, the man who organized the March on Washington, who marched with MLK.
The erasure of Bayard,
and then his erasure. And then we get to the church and sort of how like this conflict, because the church is such an integral part to the civil rights movement. It was sort of like the network. But then in many ways, it also holds the community back. And in this instance, talking about the ideals related to sexuality. But then we see that there's this gay and lesbian church in LA. And I have to say, that church looked fun.
Yeah, that church, again,
that church looked fun. I would have gone to that church.
Church can be like gumbo, right? It's about what ingredients are you putting into it. But, and I've said this before, but in many ways, sometimes church or religion has been used as a survival mechanism. But eventually, the mechanisms that we use to survive, when we can get beyond that, they do hold us back. They are a crutch that might even cripple us. So there has to be an evolution in every way and everything. And the church is rigid in many ways, that the tenets of religion, any given one, and it can be toxic.
There's another section about like basically, do I talk Black, in this examination of how we present and how that defines us. And I really related to this one too, because I often get that comment, and then also because I sound gay. And then a couple of things spoke to me, because I grew up in South Central Los Angeles, which is an area that is sort of, it's iconicized as like this urban jungle, like literally. And it's so ironic to me that I feel like people who will often criticize me as like not being Black enough, when I could argue that my experience based on some people's rubric would indicate otherwise, and perhaps that I'm more Black than you are. But I don't go by those rules, and I don't think it makes sense. But
what, and again, what does something like that mean, and why does it matter? Like, what does it mean? You have less or more to offer because it should be, we all have something to offer and we all have a perspective that could be worthy. So why are we shutting down or diminishing?
Well, I think my answer would be the way Marlon constructed this documentary is that all the pieces of the gumbo is
Make
what
the gumbo.
what make it so great, and like we should all embrace each other instead of, well, just like I was complaining about earlier with Emilia Perez, like all this infighting is not productive.
No.
It's like, why are you attacking me when there's a greater enemy like loose, and like we should be working together.
Mm-hmm.
But and trying to help each other understand our perspectives and unify. But something that really spoke to me during this section was this idea, and I forget who said it, but basically, like, they say that it's pointless to try to prove ourselves to people who don't give a damn about our reality.
Exactly. Yes.
And I think that that's something I've really learned putting stuff out into the world and then getting comments like YouTube videos,
mm-hmm.
is that it really has to run like water off a duck's back, because these people don't care about me as an individual. Like, they don't care about my reality. So why should I care about whatever nonsense they want to put on me?
It's not about, and maybe
I'm as invested in your comment as you're invested in me, in my reality.
It's not about
zero.
It's not about like caring. It's about like, this is not something that you're not engaging me in. You're not engaging with me in a way that's effective. And that's it. And
well, again, yeah. And getting back to Emilia Perez, that's a good point. Like, if I do say something that is hurtful, if I do misunderstand something, if I need to be educated, the best way to ensure that I am not is to attack me in that way.
Again, calling out doesn't work. That shaming people doesn't work. Bullying people doesn't work.
In fact, it has the opposite effect.
Yes, it makes people double down.
Like, see, you people are bleh. Like,
yep.
Another really powerful image within this documentary is that they captured footage of Marlon running naked through the forest.
What made me sad about that is he knows he's dying, and he's speaking to a woman off screen, he's saying things like, "I hope you use this footage," which is kind of heartbreaking to think. Yeah. He's not going to have, but what he's given this to the control of this project to somebody that is going to do the best they can with his vision. But anyway, that made me feel something.
Well, we can finish up on that, because I think Marlon Riggs, just watching him now with these two documentaries I've watched, he just seems like such a beautiful, smart, fun person. Mm-hmm. He died at the age of 37.
Yeah.
He was a gay Black man who he just seems like he was such a great person, mm-hmm. and such a great artist. And I think it feels lucky that we have
what we have
from him. And I would highly, highly recommend, well, I know in our review of Tongues Untied, I said the same thing, but I would highly recommend people seek him out. What's the name of the set you have?
The Signifying Works of Marlon Riggs.
I meant to look this up.
But yeah, I mean, it's exactly, one of many reasons why I love the Criterion Collection, is that it, granted some of, if you don't want to buy physical media, they have a channel that has a lot of their stuff.
Listen, the Blu-ray set is available on Amazon for y'all who still want to support Jeff Bezos, and it's Prime, $26, 1-day shipment.
Well, if you want to avoid that, you can buy the directly from Criterion. And you know what? They have 50% off sales at least twice a year. This is an investment that's, I think, worth it to have. I did want to touch on one last thing I like from Angela Davis.
Oh, go ahead.
There's a segment, I think it's towards the end, talking about how there's this we have this way of looking at rural areas and rural people as having a backwardness. And she said something I thought was really profound, that the thing about these spaces, though, is that there's a willingness to remember, which I think could be applied in many different ways to the main conversation of this documentary, but it's like because a lot of this also has to go to do with being unmoored if you don't know your ancestry. But I think that we can apply that in broader terms as well. That we need to a willingness to remember, this openness to the past, and even though it's painful, it is maybe that is the only way we can really move forward with this acknowledgement, but anyway.
What would you give Black Is, Black Ain't?
4.
I'm debating. I was thinking either 4 or 5, so I'll give it 4.5.
Okay.
I do think that knowing that he didn't finish it, and maybe knowing that maybe it's not exactly how he wanted it, is maybe what's stopping me from giving it a 5. But I think it's really special.
I agree.
So yeah, 4.5 for Black Is, Black Ain't. All right. Next week.
Well, Sundance is going on, covering it remotely. We'll have a little bit of coverage for some competition film from Sundance.
Yeah, we already dropped a video for The Things You Kill.
Yes,
which I thought was excellent.
I agree.
And if I think people can watch it via the Sundance site, right?
Yeah, I think probably at about the same time that the press that's covering it online can also do it. But
I know we have another Sundance film about some gays that'll drop next week. Or this week, I guess, technically.
And there's a new Isabelle Huppert film we'll be watching.
And then next week, I know we're watching... Oh, I don't have anything on the calendar.
That's not true.
Oh, what are we watching next week?
Companion is next week.
And that new Reese Witherspoon, Will Ferrell movie.
You're cordially invited. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That looks kind of... I do like Will Ferrell, so hopefully it'll be good.
Yeah, so a couple things. Mm-hmm.
Are you reading anything?
Oh wow! So while I was in London, I read Mrs. Caliban by Rachel Ingalls, which I really enjoyed. It's about this woman that falls in love with this escaped sea creature experiment, and they have a very sexual torrid affair. Philip Kaufman was going to make this into a film, but then I think Shape of Water happened for Guillermo del Toro, and then everything fell through. But I would still love somebody. There's still an auteur that could make Mrs. Caliban. It's a swift little read. It was a lot of fun. I really liked it. And I say it's funny because I've been meaning to read it, and then I watched Sigourney and the Tempest, with the character named Caliban. Anyway, and then after that, I read, this was also fascinating. It's called Blue Lard. It's by what?
Blue Lard.
Yeah, I made you read the back of it.
Oh, okay.
As I'm wont to do.
Oh, yeah, about the, yes.
And it's by Vladimir Sorokov, which is kind of a controversial title because I think there were book burnings in 1999 when it was published in Russia. But it's okay. So loosely, it's this futuristic sci-fi tale, and all of these great Russian writers of yore have been cloned to kind of rewrite or I guess write new pieces in their style. But these clone Russian writers who aren't quite perfect with their output also have a byproduct of this like blue lard that they exude, and that lard is collected and it has like mysterious properties, and from the future they're sending it back to the past to like Stalin and Hitler, who are using it in weird ways. The blue lard might also just be in a hallucinogenic drug trip. I'd say this is a book where you let the language wash over you, and it's very bizarre. So if it reminded me, if this was between William S. Burroughs' Naked Lunch and James Joyce's Ulysses, that's very much how it felt. It becomes a little more lucid by the end and batshit sane and crazy. And I can see why it's controversial, because there's a very graphic sex scene between Stalin and Khrushchev. And Hitler is this person that has like blue electricity flashing out of his hands. It's a trip, and I thought it was a lot of fun, and I would love to see it more enterprising, because Cronenberg, I thought, made an excellent adaptation of Burroughs' Naked Lunch, and I think somebody could do something with blue lard. I don't know. I loved it, and I own Sorokov's Ice trilogy, which I think has kind of bumped up in my mind of something I need to read sooner rather than later because it's been years. But yeah, fascinating. Loved it. And right now I'm reading Now Begins the Night by Alain Guiraudie, the filmmaker, who also writes books. And I'm writing that in anticipation. We're going to be speaking about his 2013 film Stranger by the Lake, and this was another queer narrative that he wrote, and it's just priming me for anticipation of that.
Oh, that's right. We're going to do another video with Queer Cinema Catch Up, and the film will be Stranger by the Lake.
Yes. So I'm reading Now Begins the Night just as something I can probably reference as a footnote, but I'm also really enjoying that.
I'm happy for you. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, but we have another podcast at least before I go to Berlin, so we can probably talk about. We haven't talked about what's been revealed to play there, but more on that later.
Oh, I'm. What's the Rocky Horror Picture Show line about anticipation or
anticipation? The way he says it.
Oh, maybe. Ta-ta.